book is The Lighthouse Keeper's Cat. Hamish lived with Mr. and Mrs. Grinling in the little white cottage on the cliffs. Mr. Grinling was a lighthouse keeper. Some days Hamish went to work with Mr. Grinling. He liked to help the lighthouse. When visitors came, Hamish would show them around. "What a magnificent cat," they would explain. Hamish, king of the lighthouse. Some days Hamish worked with Mrs. Grinling. He liked digging in the garden where she planted the seeds. He also liked to help with the cooking. "Fish with everything" was Hamish's motto. "Not in chocolate cake," said Mrs. Grinling firmly. A lot of the time, Hamish liked to sleep. One night, when he was curled up in his favourite place, he heard Mr. and Mrs. Grinling talking. "They were there again today," said Mr. Grinling, "scampering and squeaking. The inspector of lighthouses is coming next week, and he says mice might eat the wiring." "What about Hamish?" asked Mrs. Grinling. "He might catch them for you." Mr. Grinling chuckled. "Hamish chase mice? Really, Mrs. G? He's much too plump and well-fed." "He might be persuaded if he wasn't quite so well-fed," said Mrs. Grinling. "He might chase mice if he didn't have any breakfast before he went to the lighthouse." "You mean starve him?" whispered Mrs. Grinling. "Shh, Mrs. G, he'll be upset if he hears you." Hamish was upset, very upset. "No breakfast," she'd said. "Starve him," she'd said. "Well, my quivering ginger whiskers," he thought. "We'll see about that. Nobody starves the lighthouse cat. If they don't love me anymore, I'll go somewhere else to live." Early next morning, Hamish left home. As he made his way to the village, he met all kinds of strange creatures. Some wanted to chase him and some wanted to play. He was delighted when he smelt a house. Fish," sniffed Hamish. "Probably shark." "Look, Mum," called the little boy. "There's an enormous cat at our door. I think he's hungry. Can we feed him?" Hamish liked the breakfast they gave him. He liked the big children. They played hide and seek and chased the mouse with him. He didn't like the baby. It rolled on him and squashed his ears. Not bad though, thought Hamish as he jumped up to sleep beside the stove. "I like this house. I think I'll stay." "What's this?" exclaimed the mother. "A cat who jumps on benches? A scavenging cat. Not in this house. Scat, cat," he said. "Out you go." And she shut the door behind him. "Well, my quivering ginger whiskers," thought Hamish. "We'll see about that. Nobody shouts at this lighthouse cat." And he stalked off down the road. A tabby kitten dropped on him from a tree. "Play with me and you can share my dinner." Hamish liked the dinner so much that he forgot to share. The kitten swung on his tail. "Play with me and you can sleep in my bed." Hamish slept in the bed, but it was so large there was no room for the kitten. "Who's your ginger friend?" asked the old man. "Just a minute." The kitten hissed at Hamish. He wasn't a friend. He didn't share. But Hamish wanted to stay. He liked the dinner and he liked the bed. "I'll show them how clever I am," he thought. "I'll make them look at me." But the old man and the kitten took no notice. They ignored and purred together. "Well, my quivering ginger whiskers," Hamish cried. "We'll see about that." Nobody ignores the lighthouse cat. But he didn't stay grumpy for long. The sun warmed his orange whiskers and the smell of warm mouse tickled his nose. It was nearly dark when Hamish found the yard. He looked around. "This is no place for a lighthouse cat. Probably mice, possibly rats, maybe cats." They were not pleased to see Hamish. "Who invited you?" snarled the tattered grey cat. "This is our place." "We don't like strangers," hissed the one-eyed black. "Skedaddle, mush, beat it. You don't belong here." Hamish skedaddled right to the top of the tallest tree. "Well, my quivering ginger whiskers," he puffed. "We'll see about that. Nobody snarls at the lighthouse cat." He peered over the branches. The cat's eyes gleamed below. "Perhaps I'll just stay here for a while," thought Hamish. The lights of the village blinked around him. Far away, another light flashed. Hamish sat up. "My lighthouse." He thought about Mr. and Mrs. Grinling. He thought about the little white cottage. The leaves of the trees rustled and the tree began to sway. "It's time to go home," thought Hamish. He looked down the tree again. It was too dark to see the ground anymore. I don't like going down, thought Hamish. I can't go down. I want to go home. He yowled and yowled, but nobody heard him. When the thunder rumbled and the rain poured down, he yowled again, but still nobody heard them. After a while, the rain stopped and a soggy, sad ginger cat went to sleep. Mrs. Grinling heard the thunder too. Oh, my poor Hamish, she cried to Mr. Grinling. Where is he? He'll be so frightened. There, my dear, soothed Mr. Grinling. You know our Hamish. He's a clever cat. He'll be snug and warm, or I'll eat my hat. Next morning, Mrs. Grinling was up very early. There was no sign of Hamish. I'm going out to search for him, she said to Mr. Grinling. He might be hurt. Before she left, she did some cooking. Then she set off for the village on her bike. Round and round and up and down she cycled. Every now and then she would stop and take something out of the basket. The seagulls arrived at a very tall tree near the village, and they flew around it squawking. What's a caterwauling? Exclaimed Mrs. Grinling. What have they seen in that tree? Hamish! The seagulls woke Hamish with their noise. He meowed. Hamish! Called Mrs. Grinling. He looked down. His whiskers quivered. I know that smell. His nose nearly fell off his face. It was his favourite dinner, stargazy pie. Mrs. Grinling had cooked it specially. They weren't going to starve him after all. He meowed and meowed. You foolish cat, said Mrs. Grinling fondly. I'll come up and get you. She put the stargazy pie in the basket and climbed to the top of the tree. Hamish was so excited that he fell onto the pie. Mrs. Grinling lowered the basket to the ground. Mr. Grinling was delighted to see Hamish home again. Just in time, too, he said. Please, Hamish, I need your help. If Mrs. Grinling cooks you another stargazy pie, would you persuade the mice to find a new home? Hamish meowed. Next morning, Hamish and Mrs. Grinling rode out to the lighthouse. While Mrs. Grinling worked, Hamish visited the mice. When the inspector of lighthouse visited, there were no mice scampering or squeaking. Mr. Grinling was very happy. He patted Hamish fondly. A great mouse chaser, he said. The mice were happy. They nibbled some crumbs and tried not to squeak. Hamish was very happy. He stretched out beside the stove. Well, my quivering ginger whiskers, he thought. He's right about that. I'm the cleverest, I'm the greatest. I'm the lighthouse cat. The end. Thanks for watching. If you like the story, please subscribe.